hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? You can't hear me.
Oh, I turned the volume down, that's why.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
Okay, so just so you know, we just spent our time before hooking up with you, going over the text of the bill, the fiscal note, and the summary of the bill.
Okay, good.
And we watched a little bit of the testimony, not all of it. Really, we just saw two people testify. The two.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we are. That's what we know. How do you want to structure today? Do you want to speak for a bit, or do you want questions first, or what do you think?
Sure. Well, I can just tell you what I know so far. So I'm not sure that you guys are aware that there's a, so you've been looking at House Bill 1057, and there's actually what's called a companion bill to that. And that is Senate Bill 5022. And it's prime sponsored by Senator Bailey. And then there's a long list of other senators that are on that bill as well. And this is something that's fairly common in the legislative process, is you'll start a bill in both chambers, both the Senate and the House. And that way, if one bill dies, you still have a vehicle to use to try to move the legislation forward. So where it stands, so the House Bill 1057 was heard, and then it's scheduled for what's called executive session, which is basically a vote on the bill. Oh, I'm being asked to have you guys turn your lights back on.
Okay.
Because I can't see your faces now. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, that's better. So the bill, the House bill is scheduled for a vote on February 15th, which is next Wednesday. It's listed twice, actually the 15th and the 17th. And sometimes the committee chair will do that because they're not exactly sure when they'll have time to get to it. And next week, next Friday, is the deadline for bills to move out of the committee in the House of Origin, or they'll be dead. So a bill has to be voted out of committee by next Friday, or it's not moving forward. So the House bill is scheduled. Hopefully it will move. The Senate bill has already moved out of committee, so there was already a vote on that bill. And it was sent to the Ways and Means Committee because it has a fiscal note, and I understand you guys looked at the fiscal notes. And there's a hearing scheduled in Ways and Means on the Senate bill also on the 15th, so next Wednesday, in the 3:30 to 5:30 time slot. So what's kind of interesting about that fiscal note is the majority of the costs come from the community and technical colleges. And they're basically saying that they're going through an IT, technology, implementing a new technology system right now. And so they assume that they will have to provide the notices to the students manually. And that's why their costs are so high. So one of the things that I was just thinking to myself is whether the bill could be, there could be an amendment to the bill so that it gets implemented later, like 1 year from now, for example. And that's not that uncommon. That happens sometimes where you just pass a bill now, but you have it implemented later for whatever reason. But that would be a way to avoid a good portion of the costs that have been attributed to the bill. And the problem with the costs, so the whole thing about fiscal notes, especially in a year like this, so this year the whole priority of the legislature is to fund education, right? They've got this mandate from the Supreme Court that they have to meet in order to prove that they have adequately funded basic education. So anything that's outside of that, this would probably be outside of that because this is related to college, not to basic education. So anything outside of that will be heavily scrutinized in terms of the state deciding to spend money, and that's how bills die really commonly is with a big fiscal note. So so I'm really interested to see what happens at the Ways and Means hearing. And I did put a call in. I haven't heard back from them, but I put a call into the Attorney General's legislative liaison because this is an Attorney General request bill. And so I wanted to find out from him what his sense of the bill is and whether they would be open to having it being implemented a year later to avoid some of the costs. So I was hoping to have an answer back from him today, but I didn't get that yet. So,
okay.
But that's what I know so far.
Awesome. Thank you for that update. think we might have some questions about the fiscal note itself, just to make sure we understand what that is we're looking at. And then you said a few things that piqued my interest, that maybe some students have questions about the same things, or I do if they don't ask that. But does somebody want to ask a question about the fiscal note to make sure we understand all about that? Michaela?
Yeah.
Can you come up here to make sure she can hear you?
Okay. So, what will the money be used for and stuff?
So the money would be used to for the colleges to provide the notice. So, you know, basically, I don't know. I mean, imagine how long does it take to send emails, really? Because it's email notice, but there's going to be some staff time involved, basically, in sending out the notice to the students on what their loan, you know, the new loan programs and whatnot. So that's really, I think, you know, in summary, what it is mostly.
So on the fiscal note itself, on the first page, it had like $334,000 from GF, which I assume stands for the general fund. Okay, and then on the very back page, it had $17,000 coming out of the Student Achievement Council, I think. So what you've been talking about is the schools need some funding in order to like actually tell the students.
Right.
Can you tell us what that do you know what that $17,000 is?
I'm looking for that page. Let's see. So what happens with fiscal notes is the front page has kind of like the overall number, and then it's broken down. Within it is broken down the different agencies, basically, or the different, in this case, it's universities and the Student Achievement Council. It's their cost. So let me see if I can find the detail on the Student Achievement Council in my packet.
She's looking for.
Yeah, licensing. Okay, so. So the Student Achievement Council, it says that they would need to develop a form, update program manuals to train basically the colleges regarding the new requirements. So apparently they're in charge of like certain like training across the board for different colleges. So they'd have to update their manuals, which I imagine there's maybe some printing, I don't know, some cost related to that. They would have to collect a compliance form. So somebody's going to have to check to make sure the colleges are all providing this notice. So the Student Achievement Council would be the ones that would collect the information to make sure that all the colleges are complying.
Okay.
Yeah, talks more about the form. So it's basically, it's not that much money from them, but it's basically to develop a form, update their program manuals, and then just collect the forms and check on compliance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so on that same chart, kind of, on University of Washington, Central Washington University, and I think there's one more. It has non-zero, but
yeah.
Determined. So what is that? Is that like they don't have specifics yet?
Yeah, that you see that every now and then. It basically means it'll cost some money, but they're not really exactly sure how much it's going to cost. Sometimes that happens if they haven't had sufficient time to evaluate the impact of the bill. So that's what they put because they're not exactly sure. I believe the University of Washington was one that testified the other, but I'm trying to remember because I watched it a while ago. So one of the things that I'm going to try to find out is whether there are actually any colleges that are opposing this. It doesn't look like it, and none of them actually, I think, signed and opposed, but sometimes, especially big colleges can exercise influence without actually testifying in opposition. So that's a question that I have. But the indeterminate, to your direct question, the non-zero but indeterminate is relatively common, and it usually just means that they can't exactly figure out what the cost will be.
Thank you. Other questions? Things that have come up so far, or things that you had in your mind before we started the conference? What else do you want to know? Or other things based on what she's just talked about?
Other schools testing, like other schools go. Other schools go.
Come on, man.
Come on.
If you have questions, maybe come up, get in line so we don't waste a lot of time. So if you have a question,
Does that have to be about like education?
you can ask no general.
So does like other schools go and they testify like, or is it testify?
Testify in the
Or-
committee, you mean?
Yeah,
Committee
in the
hearing?
committee to like add influence to the votes or what?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of your question. Can you repeat that?
Well, do schools like colleges go and testify at the committee for the bill and do like they have like influence that way or has-
Yeah, so some testified, some the groups that testified I'm just looking at the Senate list, was besides the prime sponsor, so like the Student Achievement Council, the AG's office, which is the prime sponsor, which is asking for the bill. And then there's some student associations and some students that testified. I think the universities, I think if the colleges testify, they would have influence, but it's kind of tricky for them to do it because the Attorney General is asking for the bill, and he's kind of a big deal. So for a college, which is funded by the state, if they have concerns, they'll probably be more likely to voice those concerns like in a private conversation. It's kind of sensitive, and that's kind of how the political process is so different depending on what the issue is, what the bill is, who's involved. So this is one where I could see where if the colleges had concerns, they might not want to exactly put them in testimony on the record, but maybe they would want to have some sidebar conversations with some of the legislators. So it's something to kind of watch. Hello.
Okay, so I have a question. What does the Attorney General request bill mean?
So that's a good question. So state agencies, so I'll just back up one step, and because you guys are AP Gov and you're studying kind of all the things related to government. So in the executive branch of government, there are state agencies that are underneath the governor, and those are, those agencies, if they want to have what's called agency request legislation, they have to go through a pretty intricate and detailed process that involves ultimately approval by the governor's office for them to ask for legislation. The Attorney General, on the other hand, is a separately elected official. So the Attorney General can go directly to the legislature and ask the legislature to pass a bill. So in that case, it carries quite a bit of weight because he is a separately elected official, and he has his own legislative agenda. So this bill is one of the priorities for Attorney General, whose name is Bob Ferguson, and so this is one of his priorities. So that's what that means.
Does that mean that he wrote or helped craft the bill, or he just said, "Here's my idea, you go write it"?
Usually, yeah, good question as well. So usually, with agency request legislation, the agency itself drafts the bill, or at least starts the initial draft. Now, with the AG's office, because they're all attorneys, it's highly likely that they wrote the whole bill. If you had another agency that was, for example, the Department of Labor and Industries or something, they'd probably draft the bill, but then they might consult with legislative staff and have the bill reviewed, for technical changes and whatnot. And then just a little tidbit of information for you. So all bills, regardless of who drafts them, end up going through what's called the Code Revisor's office. And the Code Revisor will go through and put everything into the proper format so that it fits with Washington law. And even if legislative staff have drafted a bill and they think it's perfect and ready to go, it still goes to the code reviser, and the code reviser often has small changes just because they're the ones that are ultimately in control of all of the laws and making sure everything is, all the references are proper and everything is written just right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Who else has a question? Carmen has a question. He's coming.
Hi. So,
Well,
question is, would universities have to spend more money in the future years compared to community colleges?
I think under the fiscal note, the bulk of the money is spent up front in the beginning to kind of get the program started, and it looks like so the community colleges have the biggest expenditure of $250,000. UW says it's indeterminate but non-zero. Washington State University says it's $11,000 the first couple of years, and then it goes down to $4,600. The Evergreen State College has, interestingly, every year they have it at 21,000, even going out in the future, whereas other colleges have it at 0. So I haven't looked at that specifically why that is. But it looks like in general, most of the costs are just upfront, getting the program established.
Cool. Thank you. Who else has a question about this bill or just other general questions about the process? Huh? You talked about the Ways and Means Committee, right? How the bill has already passed out of the Senate.
Yes. So the Senate version of the bill, Senate Bill 5022, is already out of the Policy Committee, and it's sent to the Ways and Means Committee. And the Ways and Means Committee is basically where all bills that have a fiscal note are sent. Basically that committee is charged with deciding priorities for the state. What do they want to spend their money on? So they'll get a whole bunch of bills. Everybody has lots of ideas, and it's going to cost, like a state agency or college, for example, or a school district, is going to cost some money to implement it. And so it's up to that committee to kind of be the filter and go through and prioritize which of the proposals they want to push forward so that the whole body of the legislature can vote on it. And so in a year like this, when our focus really is education, I'm anticipating that a lot of bills are going to die in the Ways and Means Committee. And that's typical anyway, but especially in a year like this, where we're going to be under the gun to come up with a budget.
So she can hear you.
Hello.
Hello.
I just had a quick question on how I guess the amount of money it's going to cost, or how much money is going to go into a specific thing, is made or determined.
Yeah, good question. So,
Yeah.
like this bill you're talking about, or something else?
Yeah. Like, how do you guys come up with the numbers for it?
So so what happens is the agencies that are impacted. So you look at a bill. In the case of the bill that you've selected, they've got this idea and they want to make sure these notices go out to students regarding education loans. So that doesn't happen without somebody doing something. Somebody has to, create the notice, send it out. With technology, everything is cheaper. But so basically, what happens is a legislator or legislative staff will read the bill and they'll say, oh, this is going to require a fiscal note because there are some requirements that a state agency or schools or what have you have to fulfill. So they'll send a fiscal note request. It actually goes through the Office of Financial Management, which is the governor's budget office. And they send out fiscal note requests to the either the state agency or the school district or the college, and they give them a deadline. And they have to basically go and estimate, hopefully based on facts, but estimate the cost they think it will be to implement a bill. And so it keeps state agencies really, really busy during the legislative session, their budget offices, because they basically have to say, okay, how much staff time will this take? will I need to make a change to my computer system in order to comply with this? How much will that cost? So they basically add up all of the costs that they think that it will take to comply with the bill and to fulfill it. And then they report that back through the Office of Financial Management, and it goes, they create what's called the fiscal note. And then the legislators consider that when they're looking at the policy.
Other questions? That's a good question, Armando.
Okay. You said that at some point this year, like a lot of bills could die because they're focusing on education right now. If a bill dies this year, could it be like reintroduced next year, or does it like die forever?
Yes, good question. So we technically have a 2-year legislative cycle, and this year, let's see, we're in 2017. So I guess it's always the odd years is the beginning of the 2-year cycle, and so in the 2-year cycle, the first session, which is what we have right now, is a longer legislative session where we have to do a budget. But basically, any bill that dies this year is automatically sits there and can be reintroduced next year. It actually doesn't even have to be physically dropped in the hopper again. It's just there, and a committee hearing can be scheduled, or even in some cases, it's kind of rare, but in some cases, a committee chair could say, oh, we heard this last year, we're going to move it right to the floor. So technically, bills have a 2-year shelf life. But even if a bill dies in the 2nd year, it's not uncommon for that bill to be reintroduced again in the 3rd year. And sometimes it takes several years to get a bill passed. And bills die for any number of reasons. Like, it's really not, unfortunately, it's really not a logical process. So, sometimes bills die for logical reasons, like there's not enough money, or, some interest group was against it. And you can look at the bill and you can see what, you can see why it died. You can look at testimony or whatever. But sometimes bills die actually because, and this sounds kind of crazy, but say you have a prime sponsor of a bill who wants his or her bill, but there's another legislator who, they perhaps haven't gotten along with, and they're in a position to influence whether that bill passes. And so sometimes bills don't pass for personality reasons, because sometimes things end up being bargained at the end. A lot of times it's just hard to tell why things die, and sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with the merit of the bill or how hard it was worked. So I once had a bill that I had to work 3 years in a row before it passed. Not that uncommon.
Hello.
Hello.
So my question is, who is opposed to this bill beside the schools?
I don't think anybody's officially opposed to it. I'm looking at, nobody signed in.
Nobody testified against it?
Nobody testified con. I think sometimes you get the message that some folks might not want it, or particularly welcome it because of fiscal notes and the way that they're drafted. But there really isn't anybody opposing it. The question will be, does the legislature want to spend the money? And maybe there's a way that if this could be implemented 1 year from now, it would avoid that $250,000 fiscal note from the community and technical colleges, because they're saying they're going to have to manually send out every notice. So,
sorry. Seems like the loan companies would be opposed, but they maybe just don't want to do it publicly, like the companies that make a lot of money off of student loans.
I missed the first part of what you said.
Sorry, I asked the students to come over here and then I don't do it myself. I said, it seems like the companies that make money off of student loans, the student loan companies would be opposed, but maybe they don't want to say it publicly, but they might lose a lot of money.
Right, no, that could be, and there could be some behind the scenes discussions happening that I'm not aware of. So that's why I did reach out, and I'm hoping to get some more, what we call it, intel from the AG's legislative liaison, and some others that are working the bill, just to find out if there's kind of hidden or secret opposition.
So like, how long does it take to get a bill from the committee to the House of Representatives, like on average? And if it does get passed, like, does it affect the whole country or just the state?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on whether it's a long session year or a short session year, but in a year like this, so we're having our bill committee cutoff next Friday, February 17th. So the bill will then go, so bills will go from the policy committee to then the fiscal committee. And so if a bill doesn't have a fiscal note, it'll just sit there and do nothing. It'll be referred to rules. But generally it takes like 6 to 7 weeks for a bill to get out of the policy committee. Then it has to go to the Ways and Means or the fiscal committee, and that's usually about a week. And then from there it goes, it's basically eligible to be voted on the floor, but it goes to a committee called Rules, which really is kind of a stopgap place where bills die. There's no testimony in the Rules Committee, but it's basically like every legislator sits in a circle, and each time the Rules Committee meets, the person that's in charge of rules, it's either the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate, will determine the rules for the day. Like they'll say, okay, today you get to pull 3 bills to the floor, or today there's 2 steps for getting a bill pulled to the floor. So they might say, today you get to pull 1 bill from the white to the green sheet, and the green sheet is the second step, and you get to pull 3 bills from the green sheet to the floor. And oftentimes legislators don't know how many bills they're going to get to pull to the floor. So all bills basically have to go through rules before they get to the floor, and it's a way to filter out bills. It's another place that bills die. So all told, in a year like this, it's probably 2 months, I would say 8 to 10 weeks for a bill to get to the floor. Then it has to be voted on. I can't remember the next deadline, but there'll be another deadline that's like a little bit later in March for a bill to get out of the chamber in the initial House. So if it was a Senate bill, it has to get off the Senate floor. If it was a House bill, it has to get off the House floor. And then they switch and they go over the opposite body and they start over. So then they basically, like if it's a Senate bill that passes, it has to go back over to the House committee and be heard again over there. So every bill gets heard at least twice and voted on by both chambers. And then the whole thing is done at the end of April this year, basically. So it's actually pretty fast, but doesn't always feel like it.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you have any bills that you're currently working on or recently were working on?
Yeah, I do. I several. So for my clients, most of my clients have me track bills that they want me to either try to fix or maybe even try to kill. And then I have some clients that actually want me to affirmatively run a bill. And this year I have probably 5 bills or so that I actually have to try to pass. Like for example, one is related to dental. I represent the dentists, and they have a program where dentists can choose to get their license by going through a residency instead of going through a test. And the residency programs are done often in conjunctions with hospitals, and they are able to provide care to people at free or reduced cost. And there's some federal money that goes in to support those. So that's one that I'm trying to pass to actually expand the residencies that currently exist for dentists. So it's fun.
Yeah, that sounds cool. We did a little role play, and that sort of sounds a little bit similar to a bill that one of the students wrote about trying to reduce or to make it so that more medical students would be able to afford medical school.
Right.
Yeah, so sort of.
Nice.
We have about 5 minutes. 5 minutes left of school, so I think we need to wrap up here so that we can wrap up. Unless is there any last thing?
Nope. No, that's it. And the next question for you is: there's a Ways and Means Committee hearing. You're welcome to watch it. If you want, I can sign in and support for you, or I could testify for you. It's up to you. You and I can email. If you guys want to come up with like 4 bullet points, really short, why the students support the class, I can sign it. I can.
Okay.
I would.
And get that if we do that by Tuesday, would that be okay?
Yeah, and actually now that I think about it though, I'm trying to remember, actually, you know what, we should save that for the policy committee, because in Ways and Means, they would want me to speak to the fiscal piece.
Okay.
So I think what maybe we'll do is I'll just sign in and support, but we'll wait till the policy committee hears it on the other side and do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Good.
Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. See ya.